Good. Welcome, welcome, everyone, to this week's Satsang. I am so very pleased that you're all here, and uh, and I invite everyone as you come along, as you come on online here, that you put your just tell me who you are, something in the chat, who you are, and where you're from, and. I wanted to start satsang today. Hello from Sweden, it's Emiliana. Hello. And Londudno, Miss B. Sandra is from Monterey, California. Welcome, everyone. I want to start by simply doing just a little, a brief meditation. So close your eyes if you can. If you can't, you don't have to do that. But it does tend to be a little bit easier if you close your eyes. And I want you to just put your attention inside your body. And drop any agenda that you might have had, any ideas of the past, any ideas of the future, any ideas of even what you wanted to get from satsang, and just slip into the simple reality of your presence. The I simply as present. Those of you who are just joining, we're just doing a little meditation. So close your eyes. Put your attention inside your body. And as we let go of the past, the future, and even the present, even all of our ambitions and aspirations and problems, and just let them go for a moment. And simply notice what's left. Yeah, that's the best way to put it. Simply notice what remains. Yes, thought can keep going. The point of meditation is not to stop thought, but it is to simply redirect your attention away from thoughts, away from emotions, and away from sensations to the one that's actually experiencing thought and feeling and sensation. There's a lot of talk we can do and a lot of inquiry we can do into the source of the sensations and thoughts and feelings. But right now, I just want you to see if you can put your attention on the fact that you are simply aware of them. There's something very subtle, but quite palpable and quite real, that is aware of thought, is aware of emotion, and is aware of sensation. And this something does not come and go with the thoughts or the feelings or sensations. They are changing all the time. But that which is aware of them is not. At least as far as we can tell. It seems to be quite stable, unchanging. Now, is this sense, this whatever it is that is aware of thought and feeling and sensation, is that something different than yourself? Or is it simply you that is aware? And aware of being aware. Now, notice this is you just slowing down for a second to look at what's actually happening. This isn't a theology. This is not a philosophy. It's not a spiritual idea even. It's a simple, direct perceiving, that there's you perceiving everything. Now we assume we have all sorts of ideas about who I am. When I say that word I, there's all sorts of ideas about what that is and who that is. The important thing, though, is not trying to think about your own awareness of all this stuff, but to simply be aware of it. Now, when you start to do that, your mind is immediately going to start going, well, okay, well, what is this going to do? Is this going to make me enlightened? Is this going to make me happier? Is this going to make all sorts of ideas as to what the point of it is, right? But again, those are just thoughts. Those are just ideas. Those are just concepts that are floating by, and they might grab your attention because they seem to be very important. But notice that even the thoughts about consciousness, about awareness, about spirituality are all being perceived by you. And that's as much as you know about yourself, really. All the rest was added on later. This simple presence. This is what Eckhart Tolle is referring to when he speaks of simply present. You are simply here and you are aware, not as anything in particular, but just the awareness of being aware. It's so simple, it is so direct, and it's so constant that we oftentimes pass right by it. We just walk right by it because we're always on our way somewhere else. And that's the tendency of thought, emotion, and sensation. It is in constant motion. So I'm recommending that you do stop. And you give a little bit of time and interest to the subject of all of these. We are so engaged with the objects. I'm inviting you to put your attention on the subject, the one who is experiencing all of that. And to do it without any ideas, any concepts, any memories, any associations, and simply be present. And just notice how your mind wants to go off somewhere. But of course, your mind can't do anything without you. You can exist quite nicely without thoughts, but thoughts can't exist without you. So they can come and go. It's so simple, but this is the essence of meditation, and this is the essence of spiritual inquiry. We want to know who I am, who you are. You want to know, you want the answer to that question, but it can never come as a thought. It always comes as an intuitive hit. So take a nice breath. Those of you who are just joining us, I was just finishing up a meditation. And, open your eyes when you're ready. Oh, let's see. Chrissy's here from New Zealand. Barbara from Sweden. Vicky from England. Jonas is from Sweden. Iwa is from Poland. Starlight Glimmer says, low GP. I didn't get the chance to thank you for answering my question last week. Thanks a lot. You're more than welcome. Unity Transmissions. Hi, G. Kathleen from Salt Spring. So nice to be here with you today. Hello, Kathleen. Johan, hello all. This is Ursula from Madeira Island, Portugal. Welcome. Ishta is here from the beautiful state of Louisiana. Pierre has a question. Very good. Is the ultimate goal of humanity to become an individual aspect of pure divine consciousness? and with a continuity of memories and consciousness throughout all multidimensional states. No, that's not it. Um, the goal of humanity is to simply discover itself, to know yourself as the whole, and to recognize that the whole, the one consciousness, manifests itself as many. So it's not an individual aspect as if it had an independent existence from the whole. It can't. It exists in, of, and is made of that pure awareness out of which everything emerges. So the goal is to discover who you actually are. That's the only point of all existence. That's it. Excuse me. We don't want to lay anything extra on top of that. Because yes, every individual that you experience is an aspect, an appearance of the whole, of the one, of the pure consciousness. But we don't want to give any of those individual aspects any kind of idea that they're a separate entity. The aspect of a thing is simply the thing, right? You can't divorce an aspect of a diamond from the diamond. And so every being, humanity being one of them, and every being, every object of every kind is an aspect of that oneness, of that one beingness. Oh, gotta shut the door. Sorry about that. I forgot to shut the door earlier. I keep it quiet in here. So the simple goal, and I do want to keep it really, really simple. Your goal, and your goal from, you can't separate your goal from that of humanity. Your goal is to discover who you actually are, that you are what all of creation is an aspect of. And to do that, you have to transcend the sense of being a limited, finite person. The limited, finite person, of course, is going to seem like an aspect of the whole. And in some metaphysical traditions, in the New Thought tradition, that's the way they see it. The individual is the expression of God, kind of. But there's still a sense of there being some kind of an individual, separate being there. The true non-dual inquiry reveals that you are the whole. The I falls back into that pure awareness that is the source of everything, and is no longer identified with the content of awareness, but with the awareness itself. And of course, as I did in that meditation, it's not hard to get in touch with that. It's not hard to realize that this is where you are always seeing things from. And the idea that that awareness that is perceiving everything is somehow compartmentalized in this person or that person, or this animal or that bug, is simply a belief about your actual experience. And your actual experience is simply consciousness. That's all you ever experience is consciousness. So the goal of humanity, I think it's better to make it like, really bring it back home. Every individual's goal needs to be the realization that they're not the individual, that they are the divine oneness, the divine all, the divine wholeness. As to quote Muji, he said, the one who begins the inquiry does not finish the inquiry, but is finished by the inquiry. And so that goal, to put it in those terms, is to simply turn within, just like we did during the initial meditation, and recognize that which is aware. And that's all there is to it. That is all there is to it. You in that space, and you marinate there until it begins to settle into the whole nervous system and becomes the new sense of I. The tendency of the mind when we ask the question, who am I, is to try to come up with some kind of concept. But this is pure subjectivity. This is a pure subject. You cannot step outside of yourself and view yourself. So any knowledge that came from someplace else, any knowledge that came from observation, even if it's as subtle as your own thoughts, isn't true. It is an aspect at best and does not capture your reality. The reality is that presence. And the other part of your question here, and with a continuity of memories and consciousness through all multidimensional states. Yes and no. That kind of phenomena may occur. You may suddenly be able to see through all dimensions. You may see a whole memory of humanity. You may not. You may remember events. You may not. It's not important because that's part of the content. What happens, how the awakening affects you after that it's happened, isn't nearly as important as the awakening itself. It becomes just another wonderful surprise. What's it going to be? Well, to quote Jack Kornfield, after enlightenment, the laundry. The ordinariness of it, the plainness of it. But in that ordinariness is just this wonderful sense of peace, of quiet, of intelligence, of creative expression and creative license. That's all a consequence of it. And yeah, you can have some remarkable things can occur. You can find yourself all of a sudden being a healer. Because in that completely expansive and open sense of presence where everything is welcome and nothing is rejected, it is the perfect environment for healing of all kinds, both physical, mental, and emotional. But it will not be something that you do. It'll just be a natural consequence of what happens as a result of simply coming to know who you are, who you really are. And so everything, as far as I'm concerned, it's the most important inquiry a person could do. Can do. I mean, it's the most important thing in the human kingdom. Simple as that. To know who you are brings everything else in focus. So I hope that answers your question, Pierre. It's a deeply significant one. I just always like to encourage people to focus more on the goal of self-realization than on the effects that the self-realization may have. The literature is just redolent with all sorts of stories of extraordinary events that have taken place around spiritual people, including the healings of Christ, and same thing happened around Buddha and everyone. And so the focus being on that, there's a sense of thinking that that's like the objective. And of course, the downside of that is if you're not doing that, that stuff isn't happening for you. Well, I must not be awake, because if I was awake, then I would be experiencing all of that. And it's not necessarily true. The awakeness, the truth of your being, is something you go for because it's the truth. For no other reason, not because of the benefits it's going to give you. This isn't a business deal. We seek it because it's the truth. Yes, in the truth there is the promise of the end of suffering, and the dawning of peace and happiness, and that's a fact. That is what happens. And from that point of view of peace and happiness, all the rest becomes inconsequential. If suddenly you have the knowledge of all events that have ever taken place, great. And if you don't, well, that's great too, because you have what you really, really want. which is peace and happiness that isn't transient, isn't impermanent, that actually is just reliably there, even when your attention isn't on it, even when it's not focused in meditation. There's just the sense that it's always there, because it is always there, because you're always here. All we're doing is taking your natural sense of presence and existence, and we are removing from it everything other than it. And what's left is pure you, the pure, original, innocent, inviolate, untouched, uncorrupted you, just as you actually are. And little by little, over time, you will find that that sense of being is the sense of being, and that what you experience as the I amness or the presence is exactly what everyone else is experiencing. It is the same presence, the one mind, the one I, the one self, the one beingness. So, Barbara writes, "Hi GP, what do you think about spiritual bypassing? I highly recommend against it. Would it be possible that inner reconciliation could be a tool not to be using spiritual bypassing?" Yes, indeed. Inner reconciliation is exactly the opposite of a bypass. You're not attempting to transcend or go around the energetic stuff that's going on within the system. You are going right into the heart of it. So if there's a trauma or some kind of energetic pattern going on, the only way to truly free yourself, free the energy from the system that allows it to be more harmonious, is to go to it and be present with it. There's no bypassing whatsoever. As a matter of fact, everything is about bringing up all this material as in the most open, spacious, and safe environment that it can, because that's how traumas are relieved. That's how our negative patterns, for lack of a better term, are resolved, because they're all the result of just kind of traumatic pains and wounds that we carry around. And to just deny that they exist metaphysically is a spiritual bypass, even though there's truth in it. They exist as the energetic pattern that is creating suffering. They're not a reality, right? But that needs to be seen very clearly, and that seeing takes place in the presence of deep compassion and love, which means you actually allow that pain, that wound, that stuff to be welcomed into consciousness. Spiritual bypassing just tries to keep it out from consciousness and pretend it isn't real. And I did that for a long time. I was quite, and there was a lot of benefit from that, but I could only get to here and I couldn't get any further. That's when I started to embrace what I was experiencing. And the end result being is that in that spaciousness, being that spaciousness, I could let all this happen without identifying with it. So it gets to the point of being free of suffering, but quite capable of being with the pain that would be causing suffering if you are identified with the person. There is no discounting in the, you can't get enlightenment at Walmart or Costco. The price to be paid is the deep inquiry into your real nature and the willingness to be completely present with whatever you're feeling, whatever sensations are there, and whatever thoughts happen to be there. This, to be willing to do that, is to be the pure, loving presence. And so that's what inner reconciliation is about. You are being that loving presence. And the loving presence isn't disturbed if some really difficult or ugly or frightening material rises to the surface, which it will. The more open you are, the more spacious you are, the more loving you are, the more an inner safe environment gets created, the more this material is free to come up on its way out. It's not coming up to get you. It's simply the release of this traumatic energy that we all carry around with us. We all have it more or less. And the whole idea is to by establishing the true sense of who you are, you're no longer identified with all of the psychological material that has been accumulating. You're not identified with it. And so you're no longer intimidated by it. It can just come up as it will, because these are the patterns that are, literally programmed into the body. So does that answer your question, Barbara? I hope so. Before I am says, hi, G, Catherine in Ireland here. Hello, Catherine. We have Jay. Hello from India. New to this beautiful channel. Welcome. Whereabouts in India are you, Jay? I've only been to Rishikesh. That's the only place in India that I've been to. Mark C says, hi, GP. And let's see. And everyone around the world. Mark here from Vermont. Hello, Mark. Glad to have you here. Jonas asks, I am presupposes thinking, namely that I am. That which is aware is separate from thinking. So we do not know what is. Being is not knowing. Agree? It is not knowing in the sense of normal way we know things. That is objective knowledge, right? I know something. I know this glass, and I have a name for this glass, and it has a function and a purpose. And actually, I'm kind of thirsty. That's objective knowledge. The knowledge of the self is not objective, because you can't stand outside of yourself and look at yourself. But yet you do know that you exist, right? There's no doubt about that in your mind. And if I say to you, do you exist? You're going to answer yes. But in that period of time, I ask the question and you answer the yes, you went somewhere that was not thinking. Muji refers to it as an intuitive, subjective sense of being. There's a sense of being. And that sense of being knows that it is, not as objective knowledge, but as transcendent knowledge, jnana knowledge, prajna paramita, transcendent wisdom. It is, without arriving at it, but not as one thing knowing another. And so being then and knowing are one. They're not two. This is what is meant by the Hindu term Sat, Chit, Ananda, three aspects of the one indescribable whole. Sat being consciousness, being, Chit being consciousness, and Ananda being happiness. And so the reality of your being is knowingness. The knowing is the being. Being is not something that is known. Being itself is knowingness. So there's not something that is. Beingness, isness itself. You are that, and you know that you are, but not objectively, not as a thing. All the thoughts you have about yourself are objective thoughts. They're about a thing, and the thing that it mostly described is the body. But the body is simply an experience. And that which is having the experience is not the body, and it's not a thing. And yet you do know yourself, right? So this is a different knowledge. This is self-knowledge, self-realization. It is recognizing that you exist and you know you exist. In fact, you could not have one without the other. They're not two. beingness and knowingness are one. They're exactly the same. Everything is the knowingness. Everything you know is actually a result of the knowing itself. The knowing and what is known cannot be separate. But that's when you turn back outward again. So once you've realized the oneness of your own being, then you see that everything, absolutely everything, appears in this knowingness. But the knowingness is not an object. It is not a form. It is not a person. Is that clear, Jonas? When you say I am presupposes thinking, the word I am is a thought that we present, but what it's pointing at is not thinking. That which experiences thinking is itself not a thought. That is the I am prior to any idea of I am, prior to any sense even of I am. You have to be before there can be any sense of being. And that sense of being is kind of the firstborn. It's the first thing that appears. It's the sense of I, and with it comes the universe. But that which you actually are, totally subjective, is beyond that. But it knows itself as itself. Being and knowing are one. Is that clear for you, Jonas? It's very subtle, and thank you for asking the question. Inner Smile Coach says, hi, GP. Pearl says, evening, GP. Hello. Moonlight Delight says, hi, GP. Hello, everybody. Starlight Glimmer. Are the writings that people label as holy books actually inspired by a higher self? Is there real truth in the Bible, the Quran, the Tao, the Gita, etc.? Are they irrelevant to us in modern day? Yes, there's truth in all of those. The key is to be able to discern the pure truth and distinguish it from the cultural costume that it happens to be wearing. The very same truth gets expressed in the Tao, it gets expressed in the Bible, it gets expressed in the Gitas, it gets expressed in the Quran. But also in those books, there is ultra cultural stuff that's put on there too, cultural norms and cultural rules, because they get very intertwined. The key to them is to making use of those things is simply to be able to learn to discern the truth behind the words, the word behind the words. For that, I do prefer more modern expositions, something like Muji would do, and Papaji and Ramana is relatively modern, very different approach to it. It isn't sprinkled through story. There isn't a cultural layer on top of it. Zen, for the most part, is like that. There's some cultural stuff on around Zen, but the fundamental teachings of Zen are very precise and right to the heart, and they're not clothed in parables and stories and that sort of thing. People need parables and stories while they're still in a position where they need the cultural support, the cultural environment. And of course, we need the culture. I mean, culture is simply how we agree to to be with each other. Conventions that we can agree on, like we're going to stop at red lights. That's a cultural convention. There's no deep spiritual truth in it. It's simply a cultural convention, and those are useful. But oftentimes, most of the books in the West, it's not quite the same in the books that came out of India. They were much more direct. But even the Gitas, there's direct, like the Bhagavad Gita, which is about Krishna. There's a lot of story and myth and legend in it. But then when he actually would give that discourse in it, it's very precise and to the point. It isn't clothed in just parables and like as a lot of those other books are. So are they irrelevant? No. As long as it's understood that the meaning is not on the surface in those books. You have to dig. many, many years, I was just, I was totally into the Bible. And, but I would take a passage and I would just take it apart. I look at different translations of it. I look at the meaning of the names that were there. And I began to discern the deeper non-cultural, the transcendent truth that was embodied in the story. It was later when I started discovering books about Nisargadatta, actually, when I read I Am That, and I said, damn, I mean, he just says it. He doesn't bury it in stories. He just says it. So I think we're in a position in our modern day where we don't have to search for it, buried in the culturally traditional writings. That we can just say it outward. We have the vocabulary, we have the insight. We can do that. But for many, that's still going to be the deal, because it's it's just part of the cultural tradition. I'm glad I know how to do that, because I can talk to somebody from the point of view of the Bible and give it a different meaning for them. Not so much the Quran. I don't know that very, very well. And the Tao, I can as well, and some of the Gitas. So I guess they're not irrelevant, but they may be irrelevant to you. To you personally, they probably are. There's probably no need to go there, unless there's some residue of your own history and the like. A lot of the people carry around a lot of the guilt and shame that was traditional with first the Roman Catholic Church, and now even worse with fundamentalist Christians, which Chris had just refers to as Christian heretics. Enormous amounts of shame and guilt that really get ingrained in us. So sometimes it's useful for an exploration like that to help kind of get through our own cultural program, to see it was a complete and total heretical misinterpretation of the actual meaning of the words. But other than that, for you, it may not be relevant. Is it relevant to anyone? Yes, absolutely it is. So it becomes a case by case basis. I wouldn't, say, nah, don't bother reading into that stuff anymore. You don't need it. I wouldn't make that as a blanket statement. I very well might say that to somebody individually when I know them well enough to know where the next step for them actually is. So hopefully that answers your question, Starlight. Pearl says, please, GP, the experience I have is not of a human nature. It feels not like who, but what. Do you feel this? Yeah. Yes, because the word who gets really associated with the person, the individual, the identity, the sense of self. What am I is as profound and significant a way to inquire into it as to who am I, but they end up merging, right? You are clearly that which is on which everything right now is registering. All the thought, feeling, and sensation, all the experience, everything you're hearing me say, the words that I'm saying, there's something where that's registering. Consciousness, right? There's something absolutely conscious about that. Now, the question is, what is that? You could say who is that, but you can also say what is that, which is fine, because it's not really a who. Like space is not a who. It's this ineffable, indescribable thing. But it really is that simple. Right? Whatever it is that's hearing my words, whatever it is that's conscious, right? That's what I am. I mean, like this microphone that I've got here is not hearing my words, right? The internet through which, it's all traveling, it's not hearing my words. Your eardrum is not hearing my words. You dig down even further and you find that the brain isn't hearing your words. And yet you are hearing. There's a sense of presence. There's a sense of existence on which everything is registered. The whole point of satsang, the whole point of excuse me, of us doing this together is to bring you to the point where you see that that's the case. And there's all sorts of ideas you've been taught about what that is. It's the body, it's the brain, it's the functioning, it's my memory, it's past lives, it's a soul. Those are all ideas. To look at the reality of it, right, is to simply, yes, I clearly am. Now, what am I? What is that? And the way to get to self-realization is by not going along with all the ideas you've been told, with going along with the hearsay. You're the body, you're a boy, you're a girl, you're Asian, you're African, you're white, you're a Buddhist, you're a Christian. Those are all added later. Those are all peripheral, and they can come and go. You could change any of those. But that capacity to experience what we call consciousness is always there. We want to get to that purely with nothing added, to see that for what it is. And of course, I say it because we have to use these languages that are like, subject object, but it's not it, it's you. It's what am I? It's clearly me that is experiencing. It's clearly me on which all of this is registering. So who is that? What is that? And the who is that, you're right in your question that oftentimes the who, there's a sense of wanting to make it a personal, kind of define it in some way. But the moment you define it, you've made a boundary between self and other, and you have created a person. You've created a finite sense of being. It's all, but even that action of creating the person is being seen. Something is registering that. So what is that? I can't tell you what that is. I just keep pointing you back there so that it reveals itself. That is, it reveals itself to itself because it's you. The street name for God is I. And this is what all of those books are ultimately referring to. They're referring to that sense of self. It gets twisted. It gets twisted into, the God out there, the tribal God kind of thing. And my God's better than your God. And my God can beat up your God and that sort of thing. But they've just turned it into some kind of an object. But this place where everything registers, and you can't go any deeper than that. There's not something behind it. It is the place from which it's all being seen. There isn't any other place to go. That is what all of those books have been pointing at. So do I feel this? Yes. It is not a who. It's not a what really either. But maybe that's closer. Obviously, in your case, that's a closer word. It's a better pointer for you than who. But it's not a what either. It's not a thing. It's not a thing at all. It transcends any of our pronouns. So, Mark C says, question GP, is it safe to say that the I am is awareness itself? And what I do day to day is an expression of that consciousness. It's not only safe to say that, it's actually accurate. Yeah. The I am is the awareness. Right? That which is aware of my words is the I, isn't it? I mean, just look, right? I don't want this to be a concept. The I am is awareness, because now it becomes a thought. You got two things, the I am and aware. Just look directly. You are obviously aware of my words. That's awareness, isn't it? Is that not the I? Is that not yourself? Whatever that is. Now, forget any ideas about what we might think that is, but is that not you? So the I am and the awareness, I mean, how can you possibly separate them? The I am without being aware of being the I am? What? You are the awareness. And what you do day to day is an expression of that consciousness. Everything is an expression of consciousness. But notice that everything happens within consciousness. We think it's happening out there, but that's just a mistaken perception. Everything is an expression of consciousness. Everything is in consciousness. Right? You can't possibly be conscious of something outside of consciousness, can you? So everything is, in fact, an expression of consciousness. Everything has no inherent nature of its own. It draws its nature from consciousness. Just like ice has no inherent nature of its own, it is a particular form of water. Every form that anything takes is an expression of the fundamental reality of it, of which it is an expression. And that fundamental reality is awareness. And so everything that happens is a manifestation of that awareness, meaning it does not have a nature in and of itself. It does not have an inherent self. It is simply a form of something else. It is an appearance of something else. That something else, of course, is consciousness. So everything is consciousness. Everything is an expression of consciousness. And the more you recognize yourself as the awareness, the more harmonious that expression becomes. The more identified you are with the egoic mind or the person, the more discordant the expression is. Because if you see things as self and other, there's inevitably you're going to get this, you're going to get conflict. But if you don't see it, if you see everything as a manifestation of the one, there's not two there to have a conflict. And so the deeper that sinks into you, the more harmonious your experience is, the more harmonious the expression is, and the more that gets manifested as the reality. And not just personally, but within the world. You will see the world differently, and you will find that more and more harmony appears, and you yourself will be a vehicle for it. You will step into a situation that might have been conflictive and bring peace to it. You really will become the peacemaker. The peacemakers shall be known. Blessed are the peacemakers. They shall be called the children of God. Moonlight delight. Babies are born with no interpretation of things, therefore are just aware. What I want to know is awareness aware of itself? And so how can ego show up when the gurus say it's irreversible? Thanks. Is awareness aware of itself? That's the first question. Yes, babies are born with no interpretation. Right? They have no sense of self and other. They have no sense of body. It is pure, undifferentiated consciousness. It's very difficult for us to understand that until you've had some degree of awakening. Because to our way of looking at things, everything is an object. Everything is defined as an object, right? But before anything can become an object, the first object has to be created, and that is the sense of I. And the sense of I, identified with the body, creates the person. That's how the ego shows up. The sense of I identifies with the body. Now, all of that is taking place in awareness, right? So is awareness aware of itself? Of course it is. It has to be, right? It's aware of everything. If it wasn't aware of itself, it would it wouldn't exist, because it is awareness. That's all it can do. But its awareness of itself is not subject-object relationship. It is pure, intuitive, subjective sense of being. Now, arising from that sense of being is the sense of I. But it too is perceived by the pure absolute sense of being. When that sense of I arises, it turns outward. Well, it turns its attention towards the object, because the eye arises and simultaneously an entire universe arises. When the eye identifies with the experience of a body, the ego is created. The imaginary ego is created because it is nothing but a thought, because you are the awareness. This is a hard thing to explain. It's an easy thing to see. When you say, how does the ego show up? I like many teachers, have a hard time explaining how this whole thing happened. Why is any of this happening at all? What I encourage you to do is to continue to go back to that essential beingness, that essential presence. Recognize that it is awareness and that it is aware of itself, and that what we call the ego and identification, all of that is appearing to it. Now, in order to understand what is appearing to you, you have to know who you are. The more of that you know, the clearer all of these questions become. You begin to see, that's what the ego is simply an imagined sense of self. And of course, the universe awareness can be aware of anything, and it has no preference for that or others. So it's aware of the sense of self, and the sense of self identified with a form. Okay, that's what you're aware of. But notice you are the awareness of that. So the origin of that, how that happens, isn't nearly as important as the return of your sense of I to that sense of pure awareness and out of the ego. Because unless you are identified, that sense of I is identified with the ego. The ego has no real staying power. It's got no energy. It's, you've taken all the Velcro off of you. It can't stick anywhere. God, these are really deep questions, and I'm really happy to be getting. I hope that I'm pointing you, because as always, this has to become a lived experience. I really don't want to just keep it in the realm of the theoretical. But yes, the gurus are right. When the realization of that awareness is what I am, it is irreversible. But even that there's a subtle sense of the subject and object. The awareness has never ever been anything but awareness. And the sense of there being an ego and the sense of identification with the ego is simply what has arisen. That's the only reason. That's it. Why does a particular piece of music appear? Why did an itch on my nose appear right at that moment? It's just the nature of existence itself gives rise to all these various forms. You are not those forms. That is the awareness that becomes self-realization, that you've never, ever been that. It's always been something that has appeared. And all I can do is keep pointing you back to the place from which that gets seen. And at which point, a lot of these questions, they kind of lose their teeth. They begin to answer themselves, or they just disappear. Remember, the ego is not a thing. It is just a thought. And that thought is, I am that. And unless that thought is questioned, right, it's going to operate, oh, I am that. And it's going to have all of its functioning as if it is that. But when you come back home and you see that you are perceiving that is simply an activity that's going on in consciousness, and why it's going on in consciousness is anybody's guess, but it's not you. So, okay. So at that point, who cares if the ego shows up or not, right? It doesn't really matter, right? Because it's not you. Oh, that's right. There's a sense of self that arose. Great. There's a lot of sense of self. Great. Wonderful. What does that have to do with me? Nothing. It just happens to be what the experience that has arisen in this moment and will dissolve in the next. Does that help? One night? Sunil says, oops, there's that thing again. Being left to my own devices and trying to find peace and acceptance is very difficult with a volatile mind. I have to find it through the care of a higher power. Of course, in Miracles book is great. Great. I mean, for many people, the devotional path is a very valid one. Right? What I would say is completely surrender to that higher power. Yeah, there's a sense of two there. That's fine. The more you surrender yourself to the higher power, you are sapping the ego of all of its strengths, because you are no longer living as an independent, self-existent entity. You are living, the higher power is living through you. And eventually there'll be nothing but the higher power. No you. People say, well, you don't believe in God. I said, no, actually I do. I don't believe in you. You say, well, you're God. No, I'm not. I'm not God. The ego is not God. God is all there is. So I don't believe in pure person. I only believe in that. And of course, Miracles is an excellent book. Like many books of that era, and others as well, I find it to be too complex. I find it to be too much of it, which is why I don't use it, and I don't teach it. But it's had an enormous impact on so many people's lives, that it's a path. It's a legitimate path, and so. But I would, with all that said, I would take a step back and say, because you're saying it's trying to find peace and acceptance is very difficult with a volatile mind. That is a thought in the mind. Who said it was difficult to find peace and acceptance? Did peace and acceptance say we're difficult to get to? Did God say, I'm going to hide peace and acceptance over here, and maybe you'll good luck finding it? So you see that's simply a thought that's not true, that you've accepted as true and therefore had the experience of it. And notice that all of that, the volatile mind you're talking about, is being perceived from someplace else. So are you the volatile mind, or are you that which is perceiving it? And I'm sure your mind isn't volatile all the time. It's only reactive when you try to go into peace or self-acceptance, and all of a sudden it seems like it's getting in the way. What if it's just noise, just like wind blowing outside, and it's not getting in the way at all? Because obviously you're perceiving it. Put your attention on that which is perceiving the volatile mind, that which is perceiving the higher power, and see what happens. Just, oh, there's a volatile mind. Okay. But if I don't make that volatile mind a problem, it's just noise. It's going on. Yeah. Okay. Got it. That's great. But the moment I say, oh, it's hard to find peace and acceptance with that volatile mind, I've given what in fact is nothing but a pattern of thoughts. I've given that a power that it doesn't have. It doesn't innately have the power to stop you from being in peace and self-acceptance. It doesn't have that power. You do, and you've given it to that. So you've made the statement, as long as I have a volatile mind, I can't be at peace. You created that. That's your truth that you believe, and you've believed it into existence. It's not true. Peace is your nature. Self-acceptance is the reality of your being. It's there whether there's a volatile mind or not. So we just take, oh, there's a volatile mind. That which recognizes the volatile mind, is looking at it, is seeing it, is peace. Peace is not a state you attain. Peace is what is witnessing all of this. Awareness is not a blank. Awareness is rich in love and benevolence and peace and happiness. It's not an abstraction. So that which is aware of the volatile mind is the higher power. That's you. Does that help you, Sunil? Does that clarify it a bit? Barbara says, yes, that was the answer I wanted and hoped for. Now it's bedtime. Good night. Good night to you. Jonah says, yes. So I guess that means it helped him. Goalkeeper says, hi, GP. 1 year ago, I had a breakup. I'm already over that person, but since then, I feel like nothing makes sense anymore. How can I bring back my inner peace and regain happiness? Thank you. Well, the first thing I would do is, even though it was a year ago, you can't just suppress this stuff. My guess is that you're not over it because you haven't really grieved the loss of it. You haven't given your whole body and emotional system the opportunity to truly grieve the loss of somebody that you were very, very close to. And grief is nothing more. People say you don't get stuck in your grief. You don't get stuck in the grief. You only get stuck in avoiding grief. And that can go on forever because you simply don't want to feel it. So just really put yourself right in the middle of that, all the feelings that you have about it, and don't short sell it, don't sugarcoat it. Just be 100% present and because grieving is simply the natural process by which our nervous system adjusts to an irrecoverable loss, which it has to do. When you're in a relationship with somebody, there's a dynamic that gets created. There's an interdependency that gets created. There's a certain sense of expectation. It's inevitable. That's the nature of relationship. It's not a problem. That's what it is. But you realize you've got a flow of energy now that's part of the system. That's the beautiful nature of relationships. When for some reason that gets broken, a breakup, or a death, or some, just some untoward circumstances. So, you no longer have that kind of regular interaction. The system has to adjust to that because it's been, it's always been there, right? It's, it's like you always have this place where you lean, and you go to lean there one day and you fall over because it's not there anymore. The system has to have enough time and open spaciousness to be able to let that energy be discharged, because it is a trauma, and then reorganize itself, adapt itself to the new environment, which it will do if you let it grieve. That grief is what it feels like when the nervous system is adapting to a new environment. And so it's nothing to try to push away. It's nothing to avoid. It's not a problem at all. But I suspect in your case that you really haven't allowed the fullness of the grief to come. And so I'd recommend that you do that. This is really, the basic inner reconciliation stuff, to just be with that sense of grief. And then rather than trying to figure out how to make things make sense anymore, just go right into the energy of things not making sense, right? If they said, God, it's just, I don't have the same kind of motivation. I can feel it, that I should be better than, I should be beyond this. Well, you're not. Okay. So let's deal with what is, not with what should be. And just be present with that. I don't quite know what to do. I've had those experiences. Every major transition in your life is going to be like that. You just have to be present with the not knowing, which is very, very uncomfortable. And then what happens is that as everything begins to adjust, things begin to make sense before. But now they're making sense on a new level of perception. It's not an absolute sense. It's just you are now at a new level of perception, and your nervous system is adapting to that, and will of course bring about a sense of harmony and a sense of again, inner peace and happiness. And this process of really allowing ourselves to go through that is how real peace and happiness is attained. So does that help you, goalkeeper? Vicky says, thank you, GP, for that informative answer on the holy books. You're welcome. Gita Lola says, hi, GP, evening from London. Hello. Do you create your reality with your thoughts? Also, what experiences have most shaped your spiritual life? If you're asking you in general, does one create a reality with their thoughts? Or do I specifically do it? It's really the same question because we all do exactly the same way. First off, let me be clear. When I define reality, when I use the term reality, I am referring to the conscious awareness. That is reality. That's what is. Everything else is a manifestation of that, including thought. A collection of thoughts, a pattern of thoughts, forms the lens through which we perceive everything. Now, that which is perceiving everything is the reality, right? What is being perceived is simply an appearance of that reality. If you can look at it, and I have taught class. Matter of fact, I'm making available some of the classes that I've done about intentional creation. It's a thing I'm going to be doing. You'll be hearing about in the next couple of days. About this idea of creating your own reality, and it's a good step, because obviously if you change your thoughts, your experience are going to change. If you change your feelings, your experience is going to be changed. That's absolutely the case. What takes it a step further is to begin the question of, well, who is it that's trying to change the thoughts? Who is it that wants a different reality to be there? That is, a different set of circumstances. We oftentimes will question, say, well, this is what I really like. This is what I want. This is what I want to see take place. But we never ask about who it is that wants it. Where's that want actually coming from? And when you dig into it, you really find that all of our desires, right, aren't personal. There's a natural tendency of the human system to want more expansive. It wants more freedom. It wants more safety. It wants more experience. That's a very natural thing to take place. But who are you? You are that which is aware of it. And so, who is it that's creating the reality with their thoughts? That's the big question. Actually, nobody. The thoughts are the universe. When you see mind as it really is, you see that the mind is the universe. You cannot separate the two. You cannot separate what is perceived from the perceiver. And so simply the thoughts form a pattern. They create a universe. They're not the lens through which the universe is seen, because the universe doesn't exist independent of the perception of it. And so the thoughts quite literally create the universe. And there's no reality other than that, except for that which is perceiving it. That's the only place you can point to with utter certainty that it's real, because it's you, right? Your sense of existence. Now, the other question, what experiences have most shaped your spiritual life? There's been lots of them, including when I met Muji in person, which was one of the most remarkable experiences. I've never been in the presence of a living Buddha, and there was. My experience at 19 years old on the bridge that I don't have time to go into right now. I think included in level 2 of inner reconciliation, I think it's about an hour-long description of everything that led up to that moment, which was the beginning of inner reconciliation, although I didn't call it that at the time. So many different spiritual experiences, many different experiences that I was just gifted with. I was just given, right? I mean, it was just handed to me just out of pure grace, and I was willing to receive it. So the but the most powerful ones is when I began to realize the true nature of the self, the true self-realization, that the awareness that is aware of everything I'm experiencing, including the thought of I, was not the thought of I, was transcended the I, and transcended all I's, and was the only awareness there is. There are not two awarenesses, right? There isn't this awareness and another awareness over here, right? It is like a field. It's like space. The space in New York is not different than the space in Los Angeles or the space in Brussels. Right? The content is different, but take the content out, and is the space over there any different than the space here? Well, awareness is like that. The awareness that you are and the awareness that I am are the same, is the same awareness. There's only a sense of I that has risen on top of that. So the realization of that, going all the way back to even my first experience when I was 17, when it dawned on me that I had no way of telling whether or not what I was experiencing actually existed independent of my perceiving of it. And it blew my mind. And it set my feet on a very different path, a path that was very difficult for a while. But eventually, it culminated in when I was 19 years old in perceiving the inherent innocence and purity of the beingness of all beings. It was also the first time in my life that I actually felt loved. So, does that answer your question, Gita? Because the whole creating your own reality is such an open door to getting really entrenched in and establishing very firmly the sense of an egoic identity. Right? The bigger question is, who is it that is concerned with the creation of the reality from the thought? Who is it that prefers this over that, which is the only reason you'd be wanting to adjust your thoughts? And in another setting, I might have a conversation with you about this and show you how it works and how to do it and all that. But this is satsang, and so we want to go to the most essential of all things, and that is the sense of wanting something to be different than it is the cause of suffering. So and it is that motivation that is the power behind all that drive to trying to create a different reality. Okay, well, why does this need to be a different reality? Well, it means I don't like the way it is. Okay, well, I don't like the way it is. That's my interpretation of experience. That's all coming from my mind saying things about what I'm experiencing. And taking a step back from that, we go to, well, who is it that has that preference? Then we find that the preference liking this over that, there's not really a person there. It itself is just thought form that's happening. And you remove identity more from there. You see, oh, there's this thought pattern here. Who am I? It keeps always coming back to who I am. And that's the main complaint, the only complaint really I have about that whole create reality thing, is it because it's concerned with the content, it's concerned with what's out here and not with the self. It is always looking at the object, and spiritual inquiry is to look at the subject. Who are you? Who is the one that says, I want things to be different? Everybody says that, right? I want things to be different. Well, I know the things, I know the difference, I know the way you'd like to make it, but who are you? Who is it that's actually the I, right? I want this. Okay, I identify the want, I know the feeling, I know the desire of it, that's great. I know the thing, very clear. Let's put our attention on the I, the subject. Who's that? We don't do that. We assume the I. Right? But I invite you to say, oh, become more curious about the I than the wanting or the object of desire. Is that clear for you, Gita? Sheila, let me know if it isn't. Pearl says, feels alive, free falling. Wonderful. Good. Let yourself fall. Excellent, excellent, excellent. MK Murphy. Hi, GP. Thanks for helping. Hello from Daytona Beach. Hello. Hello to you, MK. Ann Kaufman. Good to be here. Hello, Ann. Where am I here? Every now and then the screen with comments on it just jumps. Good to be here. Too beautiful outside. It's sooner. Welcome. It's very lovely today here as well. Bonnie says, "Hi GP from Atlanta. Can realized masters like Ramana feel us and guide us if we feel a connection with them and follow their teachings? Or is this connection with them another belief of our mind?" No, it's not a belief of your mind. The connection is genuine. Your mind is going to objectify it, right? It's going to try to make a person who lived at a certain time and so connection. But the reality of the connection, the actual reality, is that the voice that we know of as Ramana is the voice of your true self. It is the self, or as put in the terms of the person who asked earlier, it's the higher self. That is Ramana. That's who he is. Ramana said, I asked Ramana what they're doing. He says, I'm not going anywhere. Christ said, I'm with you always, even to the end of the world, because they were pointing you away from the bodies, the physical person, the physical structure, to the essence of them. And you find that the essence of that was just pure awareness, that was Ramana, is the same awareness that is you. And just like him, it is liberating you. That is, it's liberating itself from the belief of being a person. So it's very real. And I urge people, if you feel a connection with a particular teacher, you follow their teachings. For me, it's Mooji, who is a student of Papaji's, who was a student of Ramana. So it's the same lineage. So yeah, there's a sense of projecting on him, right? But following his teachings, I bring that back into myself, not the person self, but the reality of the self. And the sense of me being a person, I project on him being a person. And so now it's somebody, the guru is somebody who has wisdom, right? That's the way, and that's okay to see it that way, right? So, because you're moving towards it, because you're naturally drawn to it, you're naturally connected to it. Right? But eventually you begin to see that there's no person, there's only the wisdom, and that the wisdom that you're seeing in them is actually in you. It is being projected on them and reflected back to you. And the only thing about the guru is they're consciously aware of the fact that they're reflecting you back to you. They're consciously aware of that. And so they're never taking on the role of the guru. They know exactly who the guru really is. It is the light within each and every one of us. And the recognition of that is the recognition of your true nature, not the true nature of the person. So you're not really trying to acquire wisdom. You're simply awakening to who you really are. And the guru reflects that back to you. So if you feel a connection to Nisargadatta or Buddha or Christ or Shankara or Krishna, it's real. It is their reality, which is eternal, which has never gone anywhere, was temporarily manifested as these individuals and histories. That is your reality. And so that connection is really your own inner wisdom calling you back home. Our attention being out there, our attention being out on the objects, our sense of identity. And that voice is saying, turn around, come back, come back, come back, which is what gurus, the real gurus, always say. How's that, Bonnie? Is that good? Starlight Glimmer. Thank you, GP. You're welcome. Mark C. Thanks, GP. No one gets out of existence, gets out of this without consciousness. Got it. Soon I'll be in touch with you. about facilitation training. Wonderful, yeah. Probably February, March, I'm going to start another facilitator training program. Um, uh, it's a lot of work for me. 4 months of really of very intensive interactions with people. So no one gets out of this existence without consciousness. Existence and consciousness are one. Consciousness is being. Consciousness is what actually is, and it's so simple. It's like, of course it is. Awareness, aware of itself. And that self-awareness is the universe. It's not empty. I mean, its nature is totally empty. There's no self there. But when awareness ponders itself, the universe is born. And it's simply, we can call it mind, we can call it the true self, the manifest self, whatever you like. But it is simply the the utter joy and bliss of awareness pondering the wonder and mystery and miracle of its own being, with no beginning, no end, originless. It just is. It's not a result of anything. Totally mysterious. And this is the wonder, the bliss of being. Popcorn Machine 84 says, hey, G, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you and to everyone. Whomever the experience inside of you is identifying as. The experience, whomever, is that a question, or are you making a comment about what it said earlier? I'm not quite sure if this is a question or not. Whomever the experiencer inside of you is identifying as. I'm not really sure. Maybe you're just making the statement, but Happy New Year, whomever the. Oh, Happy New Year to G. Sorry, I'm a little slow on that. The experience of you is identified as. No. Okay, I'm going to let it go on for now because I'm not quite sure. Before I am, a few weeks back, like that, before I am, right? Before I am, you just are. A few weeks back, you said after we die, a cloud of thoughts remains. And I think you said seeks another form. Question: how can anyone living possibly know what happens after we die? As objective knowledge, you can't. Of course not. I can't know what I'm going to find, when I walk downstairs. So how you approach something like that is to come to know what life is. It's to know who you are. It's to know what is true here. I have the experience I've had, and I'm willing to say the experience that. Apologies if I got that wrong, but Nisargadatta said it too. Anyway, it doesn't contradict any of those guys. When you look at your own life and you really zoom in and look very, very closely, you will see that there is a constant flow of thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and sensations that are constantly arising and subsiding. They come and they go, constantly. And yet that which is experiencing them, the experiencing itself, is absolutely the same. What is being experienced is constantly changing, but the experiencing has never changed. From that, I can conclude that death will simply be another experience. Everything I know of as sensation, of what I call the body, I see as something transient, coming and going, right? And this consciousness that is aware of it isn't coming and going, which means I'm not my body. The body is made of something other than me. I'm what's perceiving the body, which means quite reasonably that just applying that intelligently, you'd say, well, I became aware of this body when it was born because I've watched every single transformation of it, right? I've watched it go through. I mean, I didn't look like this when I was 10. Thank God. I've watched every single one of those transitions takes place. Why would I think that that on the other side of that, I'm not, that won't be simply yet another experience? And from that, I can just continue to extrapolate. Well, how does a body arise at all? Well, there's an energy of manifestation that takes place. And that energy of manifestation is also inherent in the nature of the self, in the nature of consciousness. And so I don't see any reason why that would actually stop. To not, to transcend reincarnation doesn't mean that no forms are ever going to appear again. It doesn't just become a blank. It means that you will no longer have a sense of being somebody, of being anything other than the pure consciousness. So I hope that it explains it. I mean, I have gotten that question many, many times. How can you possibly say nobody can say that? Well, that's almost like, telling the scientist, well, nobody can tell me, nobody can say really that there's quarks or that there's this quantum thing. Well, yeah, we deduce it. We look at what we know and we draw reasonable conclusions about it. That's simply how I came to see the continuity of life. That consciousness to me just has no beginning and it has no end, which means that the experience of having a body is something that rises and subsides, and then we rise and subside again. And there's a certain energy behind that that is inevitable, but the sense of identification is a very subtle energy that too continues to arise until it is clearly seen through. And it's clearly seen through by realizing that you are the consciousness in which it is appearing and not that which is appearing, which obviously the content coming and going is just birth and death is just a coming and going and nothing more. We could say that, the child, the 10-year-old dies to give birth to the 11-year-old. I mean, it's a constant. There's nothing else going on but birthing and deathing, being born and dying. The cells are constantly turning over in your body. That's all there ever is. And yet here I am, I remain. So it makes no sense to me that there would be just oblivion. The consciousness would simply cease. Makes no sense to me whatsoever. It seems absurd, especially when I understand what consciousness is. I see consciousness as the one thing that does not ever change and can never become other than what it is. Consciousness cannot go into unconsciousness. It wouldn't be consciousness if it did. Ishiel, hi GP, this is Ishiel Ishiel from Vancouver. Could you help me to understand where thoughts come from and who decides which to appear in our minds? Thank you very much. Thoughts are simply a form of energy, right? A subtle form of energy. Look at a plant. Look at any object, right? Any object in all of creation, and it is a form of energy. That's what energy does. It takes form. Right? The nature of energy is actually formless, but it takes forms. And so the forms themselves, the nature of the form is emptiness. That's really what the Buddha was talking about. So, this form here is this glass is a temporary energy in a particular form, and it's temporary, right? We could grind it down, melt it, and it would cease to be the glass would cease to be exist. So thoughts are simply another subtle form of the same energy as our sensations and feelings. And so now the next question that comes, where do they come from? Well, where did the sun come from, right? I mean, it was the Big Bang, right? Maybe. We don't, where did anything come from? I mean, really, if you really ponder it, we have all these assumptions about things. Well, where do the thoughts come from? Where does anything come from? From what does it arise? And so the question, what or who decides which is to appear in our minds, presumes that there's this other place where the thought that you're going to think next has already been created. Somebody's going to decide that you're now going to have that thought, right? um, there's a spontaneous arising of creation. Creation is not an act of will. There's nobody doing it. It is the nature of self itself. It is the nature of awareness itself to give rise to its self-expression. And so out of that flows everything. So it's not deciding, because if it decided, it would be like, oh, I think I'm going to do this, and then it would do it. That's how really we see God, thinking about it and then creating. But the reality of God is the actual thinking of it is the creation of it. There's no time there. What appears in the mind of God is reality. The act of knowing it brings it into existence. And so every thought is simply spontaneously arising. It did not exist at all before that. So there was no one who decided that it was going to come into existence. It simply did. And this is one of the most marvelous mysteries, because we want to break it down and say, oh, there's some kind of a plan, there's some kind of, being that's kind of governing the whole process behind all of this. And there isn't. It is simply flowing from the nature of it itself. The dog barks because it's its nature to do that. It didn't decide to bark. It is the nature of that critter to do that, or the cat to meow, or the shark to eat seals. It's simply the nature of things. And the nature of awareness is to create the universe within itself. So you don't have to worry about there's somebody deciding what the thought is. You simply have to discern that the thoughts are coming and going, and that they're not you. That any thought about you isn't true. It's just a thought. And at that point, the thought, oh, where are they coming from? It's just a form of energy. And it's a beautiful form of energy. It's a marvelous form of energy. It's a creative form of energy. It has an enormous impact when a thought that has beauty and love in it gets born within somebody. It has an enormous effect. But it's more like, it's more like listening to somebody playing jazz. They're not deciding what those next notes are going to be. It's just flowing. And again, look at this directly yourself. Just notice in yourself that a thought just suddenly appears. You can go back to where that thought originated, and you can't find somebody or anybody deciding that it was going to happen. It's a spontaneous appearance. That's one of the beautiful things about quantum is the revelation that all matter, everything that we know of as matter, is just this spontaneous appearing. Things come into existence, go out of existence. It's just complete, out of nothing into something, back to nothing again. That this actually is the way it works. And so thoughts are simply quantum pieces, right? Little bits of quantum spontaneously appearing out of nowhere, and then subsiding back into nowhere again. But just like any object that we have, they form a pattern. That's the nature of the universe. They're not random. They form a pattern, right? But it's not a pattern that there's somebody behind planning, right? I mean, we like to think of it that way, as like, somebody's building a building or making a piece of art, that there's the artist and they're planning it. But when you look at the entire process, what's happening, it's something spontaneously happening inside of them, which then, gains momentum and becomes some kind of a form that we can look at. But when you go right back to the origin, nobody created it. It just spontaneously arose. But it arises. It's not random or chaotic. Everything that arises actually has a pattern. That's the nature of energy. If it didn't, this couldn't hold a shape, right? It forms a pattern. It stabilizes in that pattern for a time. So does that answer it for you? Ishil from Vancouver. I love that city. Oh, I really love that city. Sunil says, thank you for your response on the question about a volatile mind being merely a belief. I get to see that which is perceiving through A Course in Miracles or a HP. I'm not sure what HP is, because it brings more conscious awareness of ego. Good, good, excellent. Then keep doing it. Keep doing it. I have some good friends that are just devoted to it. You know, they do their daily readings. It's wonderful. It revitalized Christianity, especially New Thought, when it came out. It's a very important um, piece in the puzzle. So great, keep going, keep going. But don't forget that it gets very, very subtle. The volatile mind is a belief, and the belief is that somehow I'm suffering because of a volatile mind. You're not. It's the belief that the volatile mind is significant and has to go away that creates the suffering. So Benoit, hello Benoit. Um, oh, oh dear, is that Ben? Oh, there it is. Hi G, can you tell us about trust? I like it. I use it, especially in spiritual communities. It can be tricky to know the real intention of the leader healer. You can never be 100% safe in group setting, can you? Thank you. Um, you continue, I can't tell if my ego is scared of yogic practices or if my genuine intuition to avoid this training and do the practice on my own. I'm taking that those kinds of related. Well, you have to trust your intuition. If you don't have complete and total trust, that don't take somebody else's word. Oh yeah, this is a great leader and the spiritual guy, and because that's cult, right? The truth has nothing to do with the personality of the leader. And if the leader isn't clearly telling you that, he's not really the leader. No guru takes credit for anything they're doing. And so if the leader is willing to just give without expecting anything in return, without expecting any kind of, you know, deference or devotion or anything like that, or and the healing, it's all given freely. Then you know they're the real thing. They don't question your coming and going. You come, you go away. You don't come back again for a year. It's fine, right? If there's an attempt to kind of hold you and say this is the spiritual guy for you, and you really, and if you go somewhere else, it could be a problem. Um, Run, don't walk away. get out of get out of Dodge, because that isn't a real teacher. That isn't the real thing. And ultimately, it comes down to your own sense of who you can trust. And give your trust. Do not put your trust in somebody because of their reputation of being this great teacher. Just trust your own instincts and make them earn it little by little. Listen to what they say. Watch how they act. Watch how their life goes. And you will find those that are genuine, have your best interests at heart, are not going to exploit, are not going to diminish you in the slightest, but are going to do nothing but that prop you up. You say you can never be 100% safe in group setting, can you? Yes, you can. Right? You can. It is possible to create sanghas and groups that are a safe environment. I do retreats all the time. It's 100% safe in a group setting. So yes, it can be there, but if you're feeling a sense of discomfort about it, well, that's something you need to definitely pay attention to. You know, don't force yourself because somebody tells you this is a great guru and oh, you should believe him and not you. That's nonsense. They earn your trust just like everybody else does. And then you can't tell if my ego is scared of yogic practices or it's my genuine intuition to avoid this training and do the practice on my own. Um, it, I don't think it's your ego, um, because the ego is more drawn to the yogic practice, especially the ones that bring personal power and capacity for doing miraculous things. And I would say yes, avoid those. Those are the fruit of awakening. and not to be pursued on their own. And some people, after awakening, get kind of yogic powers. Some don't. Nisargadatta had none. He said, "I had no need for any of that." You know, people would ask him, "Can you do these things?" No, it's requires special training. If you want to do it, go ahead and do it. Because all of those things are true. All those yogic powers are attainable. Um, but I agree with your intuition. I recommend people do not pursue those because they are a distraction from the simple reality of recognizing who you actually are. Once that has been established, it's a different world. You may pick up some of these practices. You may learn how to do some things. You may not, um, but it will be coming from the place that all these other things are simply attempting to get to. And the path itself can become a distraction. So you definitely don't want that. So I would agree with your intuition. I'm not sure you have to do the practice on your own. Matter of fact, if you can find a sangha, I think it's great. Um, um, I highly recommend spiritual community. It's really important to support each other in this. Do it by yourself and do it with others. If nothing else, to just get together in a room to meditate together or to listen to a spiritual talk like this. Um, it's incredibly valuable to do that, and it helps kind of break down the barrier of trust, and you begin to trust yourself and and trust yourself in relation to others. So it's yeah. So I think I covered it. Thank you, Benoit. Eternal Insights at OGP. Happy New Year. Why are we so much happier alone, alone in the infinite nothingness through meditation than here in the Maya universe? Why Brahma put us into that test? Um, that's temporary state, right? You just take your meditation and you don't make it about being in the state of samadhi. You make it being about being aware of being aware, right? So that in meditation, your entire attention is focused simply on being in this state of allowing everything to be as it is. There's no arguments, there's no fight, there's no agenda. You're simply being present, and there's a natural peacefulness that comes over the system. Now, get it off the cushion and go outside, and you keep your attention there while you're experiencing things. And so that, Maya isn't what happens. Maya is when you think what's happening is separate from you. That creates Maya. The moment you realize that it's not separate from you, Maya has become nirvana. Samsara has become nirvana. You see that? So Brahma didn't put you into a test. It is Brahma that is actually the nothingness in the meditation. And of course, when your attention is completely withdrawn from all of the thoughts and the normal trend of thought, you feel happy, because happiness is caused, or unhappiness is caused, simply by unhappy thoughts that are referencing who you are not, and identification with that. So when thought withdraws from it, when you withdraw your attention from that, of course you're going to feel happy. Now, what I want you to do now is to take it off the cushion. I want you to bring it outside. You're driving along, somebody cuts you off, and that irritation arises. You notice it. You don't criticize yourself for getting irritated. You simply notice, there it is. And notice simultaneously that the same emptiness that was aware of the happiness in meditation is now aware of the irritation. At that point, you are still being yourself, aware of the arising of an irritation. That irritation won't have any teeth. It won't be able to take over, and it will just pass right on through. And you'll find that you are simply walking around as your meditation. That it is simply the way you see things. It's not a moment on the cushion. It is the way in which you are interacting with your experience, and you become then imperturbable. Does that help you in eternal inside? Ida, Happy 2019, GP. Much gratitude from the north of Norway, where we are about where we haven't seen the sun for about 2 months. It will reach us again in a week. Can't wait. Thank you for being a light in the dark. Oh, you are so welcome. Yeah, I would love to spend some time in the Scandinavian. I'd like to experience that. I never have. You know, I live pretty far north. I'm in Seattle, so the days are quite short, but we do have a day and a cloudy sky. But that'd be really quite an experience. So happy 2019 to you. Bogdan says, I am a biological robot. You aren't. No, consciousness is not. Uh, the nervous system is. It's not self-aware. You are aware of it. It is not aware of you. The body is not aware of you. You are aware of it. You are consciousness. So when you look at the functioning of the body, you find that it is robotic. It's a biological robot. It's an automaton. It's simply designed to adapt to the environment in which it's in and survive. That's it. That's all it's doing. And you are conscious of that. Now, many people believe that this biological robot somehow produced consciousness. I don't believe it. I just see no evidence of it. They're so different in character and quality and experience. I am aware of the body. I have no sense whatsoever. I'm aware of my hand. My hand is not aware of me. There's no awareness in that. So you are not the biological robot. If you have identified with the body, you will act, believe, think, and feel as if you are the robot. The conditioned responses of the robot you will think of as yourself. As a matter of fact, you will project a sense of self on nothing but conditioned responses. That's a mistake. You're not your conditioning. You are that which is aware of it. I know I keep saying the same thing over and over again. You are not what you are aware of. You are the awareness of it. You are the consciousness. You are not the biological robot. That's simply the functioning of life. And it is a unified functioning of life. It is an integrated functioning of life. It's not this biological robot and that biological. There's one. It is life itself. Right? And you are the consciousness that is aware of it. And being conscious of it means that consciousness is a very different substance. And yet, consciousness appears to be more essential and to give rise to what we call the biological robot. I use that term robot. I often refer to the conditioning as the robot. First, to get people to understand that that is not who you are. But once it is established that you are pure consciousness, pure, immortal, birthless, deathless consciousness, you can then turn back outwards and say, well, what is the real nature of what I had called a biological robot? Is it really? What is it actually? But you can't know what you are experiencing until you know yourself, the experiencer. You can't. Is that, I mean, does that make sense? Right? You cannot identify what you're seeing unless you know what you are, because everything is relative to that sense of I. And so until you know what that is, everything out here is completely up for grabs. But the process of getting somebody to the point where they recognize themselves as consciousness and not as a thing, I point out that this is just a biological process. It's just a biological conditioning. There's no consciousness there. There's no sentience, nothing. It is a robot. It acts as if there's somebody there, but there isn't. The only somebody that's there is you, the one who is witnessing it. Gita says, thank you for your answer. Was clear and helpful. Good. Sunil, what I meant was the identification with ego mind is a strong form of identification that obscures light. Yes, absolutely. The light being your true being. And identification with the egoic mind obscures that because it makes you think you're something other than what you are. But there's still a you there, right? It's all happening on the lens of perception. For me, a higher power helps put it into perspective. Absolutely. Yes. For me, a higher power helps put it into perspective. Yes. It is the higher power that is aware of the identification with ego. The true self is the higher power, but you will at some point see that that higher power, which is now uh, an approach that is helping you disidentify with the ego, you'll eventually see that that higher power is nothing but your true self, the real you, the ultimate awareness. Bonnie says, very good. Thank you, GP. Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome, Bonnie. Um, let's see, what time is it? Oh, 2:52. All righty. Werner, hello, Werner. Haven't talked to you in a while. Happy New Year, GP. I have a question. I feel an intense loneliness quite often. Is there a spiritual solution to that? Yes, there is. And completely open yourself to the feeling. You're feeling something, right? That feeling has a character to it, a familiar character. And so we've identified that as loneliness. Now, the moment you put a term, a word on anything, it takes on all of the associations with that word. So there's a feeling. I say the feeling is loneliness, and then that word loneliness has all sorts of ideas and concepts and associations with it, right? So, how am I going to get over this loneliness? I better join Match.com. This is terrible. This is frightening. I'm never going to meet anybody, and on and on and on it goes. Right. So go back the way it started. Go back, as Ramana Maharshi said, go back the way you came. Go out of the story about loneliness and all the associations. Go back to the feeling, and then even drop the word loneliness. Get so much into the feeling itself that you completely open to that feeling. And yeah, it'll be uncomfortable. And you can call it loneliness when you tell me about it, so we know what we're talking about. But go beyond the word into the actual sensation in the body itself, and then just give it complete space to do whatever it needs to do. And what you'll find is that it will dissolve. There's nothing there to sustain it. It is just a feeling that comes and goes. It doesn't need a story. It doesn't need an agenda. It doesn't need a history. It doesn't need a solution, right? It's simply that presence, presence, presence. And you notice that the presence that is aware of the feeling is not experiencing, is not lonely. It's very much there. And the beautiful thing about it is that opens the door to meaningful, substantial relationship. It's one of those paradoxes. But when you're completely willing to be present with that feeling, it begins to transform itself out of a sense of intense loneliness into a sense of just openness to interaction, openness to intimacy, openness to feeling all of the joy and interaction of life. Right? So does that help, Werner? Am I getting there? Before I am says, thanks very much, G. You're very, very welcome. Little halo. I like the halo emoji. Sunil says, how do we know that consciousness doesn't have a beginning or an end if all we experience is birth and death? We don't know what happens after death. So isn't this a theory? It is a theory, but it's not a hypothesis. A theory is something that's established as fact. The whole meaning of theory is so misunderstood. So it's not a hypothesis. This is what I have concluded from my direct experience. Okay. I cannot find a beginning to consciousness. I can point to the body having a beginning, but I cannot find the beginning of consciousness. I can't do it. Look for yourself. And you'll find that there's just a belief. There's a belief that consciousness had a beginning and an ending. But when you go look and find it, you can't find it. It would mean there's nothing, then there was something, then there was nothing. That's what you're left with, right? So don't try to give this to your mind because the mind can only go from the evidence that it has in front of us, right? Look for yourself. My experience of consciousness has always been, it's always been, it's not like there's me and then there's consciousness that I'm watching coming going. I'm that. The sense of me has never, ever been gone. So I don't consider it, but I'm not putting it out there for you to believe. I'm putting it out there and doing my very best to point you to a place where you will look for yourself. Push this yourself until you're convinced one way or the other. If you find that I'm wrong, great, come and tell me and show me how it is, right? But the only thing people ever point to is, well, we don't know, therefore I can't know. Well, it's not true. There's so many things that we don't know that we can know. Why something as important as my own nature be outside of what can be gathered? To me, it can't be. Ishio says, thank you. Ishio says, thank you, GP. You're quite welcome. Puppy, hello, Puppy. Hello, GP. I'm super late. What do you think of Your Erroneous Zones by Wayne Dyer? I've been reading his books lately and loving them. That was his very first book. It's not really a self-help book. He hadn't really stepped into the whole personal development self-help thing. Well, it is kind of, self-help, but it's much more psychological. I remember reading it back in the late 70s. I think it came out in 76, 77, something like that. Interestingly enough, it got published the same year as A Course in Miracles. And Wayne Dyer just kept growing and became more and more spiritual in his perspective on things. So there's a lot about Wayne Dyer that I really like. There's a lot that no big deal, but I'm eternally grateful to him, because one of the books I've read of his, I think it's called Your Sacred Self. He quotes Nisargadatta, and the word Nisargadatta, and that word just stuck in my head. I mean, once I saw that, matter of fact, I didn't finish the book. Once I read that, it just so stuck in my head. It was like Nisargadatta. There was just something about there was the energy. Something resonated inside of me that this was important. I didn't do anything about it. I just completely forgot about it. I had no idea what it was. But then I remember, I don't know, it was a month or so later, I was in the East West bookstore on Fifth Avenue, right by Union Square in New York City. And I walked in there, and I just happened to be walking down the aisle, and my eye goes to this book, this yellow book, I Am That. And I went, wait a minute, that's the book he was talking about. And I picked it off the shelf, and I've probably read that book 10 times, 12 times, the kind of thing you read a paragraph, your mind is blown, you close the book, and you just sit with it for a while. So I'm eternally grateful to Dr. Dyer for introducing me to Nisargadatta, which actually was the introduction to the entire world of Jnana Yoga and Advaita Vedanta, which I didn't really know anything about. So, so you if you're loving them, then it's resonating with you. Keep going, right? Follow your natural drawing to things. I would never tell anybody to stop doing a practice. Well, that's not true. I wouldn't in a forum like this, because I need to know somebody more personally, and they're asking me, say, is this really what I need, or is there something else that I need? Otherwise, there's no such thing as a wrong practice, right? There can be a wrong practice for you, a practice that's outlived its usefulness, a practice that isn't delivering anymore for you, and it's time to. There's no such thing as a perfect permanent practice. There's no such thing. So you completely just be totally present, and when it isn't working anymore, you go somewhere else. But if it is working, if it is inspiring you, if it does feel connected, well, then it's doing the work. So keep going. Mark Nolan, hi GP. I find it confusing looking in the past now. I used to feel very emotional about the past. I still do sometimes, but it feels more distant now than it did before. Is this normal? Absolutely. It's lost its emotional charge. When I work with people in inner reconciliation, one of the things we do is we'll bring up painful past events. We just keep bringing up and working with it until they're not painful, until the new environment of safety has overturned the association of the memory with the emotional response. That's emotional freedom. That's EFT is another thing that I use for that. So yeah, it'll just be a memory with no emotional charge. It doesn't mean you forget. Matter of fact, it could be remembering things that you had chosen to forget. Well, that have been pushed out of the conscious because they were too painful. A lot of those will come up, but then they'll be resolved. And it'll just be a memory. It won't have any emotional charge. So yes, this is extremely normal and a very good sign. So keep doing what you're doing. Matt says, do you see a difference between yourself and, for example, Muji? Well, yeah, I'm a white kid from Chicago. He's a black guy from Jamaica. On the surface, yeah. Underneath, no. There's no difference between you and Muji or you and Buddha. There is no difference. We just think there is, right? That thought is wrong. You are the self. You are the self. That's it, right? So is Muji, right? Muji himself said God could raise up 1 million Mujis, right? So it is. So there's no difference, and yet at the same time, there's a huge difference. The vehicle through which the truth is expressed is infinitely varied. In one case, it's me. In another case, it's you, right? But the truth, the transcendent, eternal, unchanging truth, is the same everywhere. This is the wonder of true not two-ness, true non-duality. Emptiness is form. Form is emptiness. The infinite variety and the total empty oneness are one. So Calvin Parker says, hey, GP, I'm getting in late also. I'm like getting in also. Great explanation on where do thoughts come from. Good. Vicky is saying, good night. Happy New Year. Papa says, I hear you're not a big fan of yoga, but isn't yoga and non-duality somehow the same thing? I don't know. I said, I'm not a big fan of the seeking of yogic powers, mystical powers, esoteric powers, miracles, and that sort of stuff, simply because it's a secondary thing. I'm a big fan of yoga, all 8 paths of it. Matter of fact, the Advaita Vedanta that I teach also is called Jnana Yoga, which is one of the 8 paths of yoga. It's the path of wisdom, the path of true knowledge, the path of Vedanta, of the end of knowledge. So I'm a big fan of yoga. I do yoga. I was in a class a couple of days ago. The hatha yoga, the different forms. So yoga, as it originally was created, was a support for meditation, was a support for inquiry, and so it's a harmonizing of the body, and it has enormous health benefits and calming benefits and stress relief benefits. That's the physical aspect of yoga, but there's mental aspects, there's emotional, and then there's the jnana yoga, which is really what I'm practicing here. So I hope that clears. I am a big fan of yoga, and I highly recommend it. But its purpose is to help us get deeper and deeper into the inquiry by bringing more and more harmony to the energy system and the nervous system, which just frees up more energy for presence. So Berner says, yes, big thank you, GP. Mark Mellon, I do use EFT too. Thank you, GP. Yeah. Inside says, GP wishes, great wishes for a happy new year. Excellent. Well, looks like after 3 and the questions have died down. I got through all of them this time. Yay. This is wonderful. So thank you all. Thank you all for being here once again. As always, it is just such a delight to get to sit here and do this. Is just like so much fun for me. This is just so much. I just, it's exciting. It's wonderful to actually be engaged in this level of conversation. And, this is the fulfillment of my life's purpose. To do this is why I'm here. And so I I'm available to all of you for for whatever you need and however you need it. So thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you all. Thank you all. I'm seeing all the people saying Happy New Year and thank you. That was fun. Good, Shanil. that's great. Yes, it's fun for me too. Totally fun for me. So anyway, namaste to you all. Thank you so much, and see you next time.